I'm Allie from the Potomac Bead Company, and I am going to show you how to make these super cute little earrings out of some household products. For this, I will be using 20 gauge square wire. I'm using Beadalon's silver plated German style. And then I'm also going to be using 24 gauge wire. I'm using a 10 millimeter bead and a 6 millimeter bead. Mine both happen to be Swarovski crystals, but you can use anything. And then I just have it on an interchangeable Leverback earring, and I just slid it right through the top loop. So to start out with this, you're going to use some tools. The tools that you're going to use are things that you find around your house. You're going to be using a Bic pen and a Sharpie marker. The Bic and the Sharpie make perfect sizes for the 10 and the 6 millimeter. If you have different brands of pens or if you have different sizes, you can also get creative and make these with different sizes. Just be aware that your bead might not fit quite as nicely in the hole, or it might be a little snug. So try it out with the different things first and then go in to determine your bead size. To start out, what I did was I started out by making my loops here. To do my loop, I cut a section of my square wire, and I'm cutting about 4 inches of my square wire with my wire cutters. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that wire, I'm going to hold it around the Bic just as if this was a mandrel, and I'm going to take my wire around my Sharpie pen one time. This gets my big loop. To get my small loop, I'm going to hold above my big loop and take my wire around my Bic pen and make my little loop. What I want to make sure is that those cross over right on top of one another. To finish them off, I want to cut the wires right where it's about to hit, not going over the other piece. So I cut on one side, cut on the other side. And that's going to make my loop that I'm using to make my ear wire. To turn the loop in to make it a little bit more stable, and I like the look of square wire for this, you can use round wire. What I'm going to use is round nose pliers, and I'm going to take the round nose pliers at the very end tips of my loops. So this one here will be my bottom bigger loop. I'm going to grab that end with my round nose pliers, and I'm just going to turn it in. I'm holding at the very end where I can see that wire kind of hanging out, but I can't really feel it. And I'm going to turn over and make myself a little loop. If I need to, I can kind of pinch that loop closed a little bit, but that's going to make my bottom loop. To make my top loop, I'm doing the same fashion. I'm taking the wire and I'm just going to kind of curl it in towards my project and make my little loop. And then again, I can squeeze it shut if I need to, just a little bit. And that's how I make the loop at the top and the bottom of my little loopy earring here. So again, this was 20 square, and I used a large marker and then a Sharpie marker and then a Bic pen to get that size. You could use 2 big loops if you want, have 2 10 millimeter beads, but this here makes it great for 10 and a 6 millimeter bead. The other wire that I'm using again is that 24 gauge wire. And with 24 gauge wire, I'm just going to use and start out with a little piece of 24 gauge. It's easiest to start out with smaller pieces than to go with a nice big wide piece. So this is 24 gauge. I'm going to straighten it out with my fingers, and I'm going to use my 10 bead. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to wrap this wire around the side of my larger loop. To do so, I'm going to leave myself a little bit of a tail, and I tuck it underneath that large loop. The wire then is going to go over the top of the loop and then come through the loop, and I'm going to do this 3 times. The wire's coming out underneath my loop, and then what I'm going to do, and now it's securely fastened to this one side, I'm going to put my bead on and slide it right in to that little loop that I've made out of wire. On this side, the wire again was underneath, so it's underneath the other side, and I take it through and bend it through my loop. When it gets to the other side, I give it a nice tight pull and tighten that up. Again, I'm going to go through the loop with that short piece of wire again and give it a nice tight pull. If your wire is short, you can grab with your round nose pliers to tighten it up. The wire has a good amount of give that you can pull it and you can tighten it up. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim my sides. So I'm just going to go in with my wire cutters. I'm going to trim my sides and trim that extra 24 gauge wire off. And both of those wires, if you notice, are ending to the back of my project. So I'm holding it the front facing up, the back to the back. So there's my bead just kind of hanging out in my bottom loop. I'm going to repeat the same thing for the top loop. There is a little bit of play here. What you can do is, if you want to, a 12mm bead will fit in there, but it's really tight. I like to have it kind of move around. Also, unless you pinch down the sides, the wire on the sides can move a tiny bit. I don't like to pinch down the sides. I just like to let it move a little bit and kind of free flow. So now I'm going to do the top loop. To do the top loop, I'm again going to take a little piece of 24 gauge wire, and I'm going to repeat the same steps that I did at the bottom. This time I'm going to start on the opposite side because it's away from my loop. I have the wire underneath my project here, and I'm going to be wrapping the wire around, through, and I'm wrapping the wire again 3 times. I'm going to kind of push it up to the middle in place, and then I'm going to slide my bead on. If your loops get a little bit spread out, you can take your fingernails or you can take a flat nose, needle nose pliers and kind of pinch them together. I put my bead on, and then I'm going to secure it on the other side again with that same fashion. Short piece of wire. I want it to start at the back, and then I'm going to bring it through the loop, and the wire goes through the loop, and I grab on the other side. And then what I'm going to do is pull this tight. And the wire is really forgiving. I pull and grab tight, and I'm going to repeat this 2 to 3 times. Whatever I do on the first side, I want to do the same on the second side. I like to have my wire working look nice and even. Tuck that through again. And you can use the same technique to do a link bracelet. You could attach these with jump rings together and make a nice look. Again, my wires are ending at the bottom side of my little loops, and I'm going to take my wire cutters and cut off my extra wire here. After I cut off my extra wire, you can take your flat or needle nose pliers and kind of bend down those edges a little bit. There is my little S form. Lastly, you can kind of bend it in a little bit if you want it to be a little bit more rounded to get the shape that I'm wanted. And then with my other one that I did, all I did was attach it right to a ear wire. And there you have just the simple little earrings that were really easy to make with a Bic pen and a Sharpie marker, and some 24 round wire and 20 gauge square wire. Again, you can use round wire, you can use thicker wire and 18 gauge. I like 24 for the wrapping. And you can add a jump ring if you want to the top of them. You will need to add 2 depending on the way that your ear wire sits. Or again, what I did is I just took a simple Leverback changeable earring, and I slid it on, closed it up, and I have my set of earrings. Thanks for watching, and enjoy, and hopefully you can have some fun with wire.